Have you ever wanted to turn some of your recipes keto? Well, I'm sharing all my secrets today and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. Whether you want to make cookies, cake, muffins, there are keto-safe replacements for all of our carb-heavy ingredients, so you can easily make your favorite comfort foods. Today, I'm sharing my ultimate keto baking tips and ingredient swaps so I can show you how to bake like a pro. First up is keto flour, since we can't or really shouldn't have all-purpose flour on the keto diet. There are so many options to choose from, but I'm just going to share with you my favorites because they're tried and true for me. Almond flour is light, airy, and has a slight nutty aroma. And you want to get the super fine milled almond flour just because it has a texture similar to all-purpose flour. Don't get the almond meal, that's too gritty. Since it's lighter, it doesn't measure cup for cup with all-purpose flour. I usually like to go with a ratio of 1 1/4 cups of almond flour to 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Coconut flour is denser and tends to absorb a lot of moisture and liquids, so you don't have to add as much of it. Because of that, it also doesn't measure cup for cup with all-purpose flour. So I like to use a ratio of 1/4 to 1/3 cup of coconut flour to every 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Coconut flour also has a slight coconut smell that a lot of people get turned off by. When I'm making cake or cookies, I tend to shy away from only using almond flour or coconut flour. Just using one type of nut flour makes the texture strange. It's kind of gritty if you're using almond flour. If you're using coconut flour, it can be really dry and just have that underlying coconut flavor. So I prefer to use a combination of the two flours. I feel like it yields a texture and a flavor similar to all-purpose flour. So now if you're going to convert a traditional recipe, if a recipe calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, what I tend to do is use 1 1/4 cups of almond flour and then 1/4 cup of coconut flour. And if you're allergic to nuts, you can use sunflower seed flour. That measures cup for cup with almond flour. There's also lupin flour, which I haven't really experimented with too much. It's made from the lupin bean. But what I have used from the lupin bean is lupin meal. It is a coarse texture. It's just ground up lupin beans, but it has a texture and almost a flavor similar to cornmeal. That's why I use it in my pizza crust. I did it in my deep dish keto pizza. If you haven't seen that video before, I'll have it linked down below, but this pizza is amazing, and it's thanks to that lupin meal that we used. Obviously, sugar is out of the question if you're on the keto diet, but luckily we have a lot of keto sweetener options that are available, and I'm going to share some of my favorites. My go-to sweetener is a blend of monk fruit and erythritol, and the brand I usually turn to is Lecanto. I like Lecanto brand because it's crystallized like sugar, so it actually looks like granulated sugar. And there's not much of a cooling sensation, like if you were just going to use straight erythritol, and it doesn't have the bitter aftertaste if you're using straight monk fruit. So the combination of the two just kind of lessens those side effects, and it creates the perfect combo. We also have replacements for powdered sugar. The brand I usually use is Swerve, just because it measures cup for cup like powdered sugar. There's also brown sugar substitutes. There's Brown Swerve, Truvia Sweet Complete Brown is another one. Those I like because they pack just like brown sugar. There's also one that Lecanto makes. It's called Golden Monk Fruit. It's more of just like a granulated sugar type that's dyed and also has that caramel or molasses flavor similar to brown sugar, but it doesn't pack like an actual brown sugar does. I like these sweeteners because most people can tolerate them and because they measure cup for cup with sugar. There's a lot of other sweeteners out there. I stay away from the sugar alcohols, one, because they can cause digestive upset in some people, and two, xylitol can be deadly for dogs and not safe for my whiskey dog. Stevia and pure monk fruit don't measure cup for cup, and I don't really care for the aftertaste of those either. Another sweetener that is growing in popularity is allulose. Sometimes the monk fruit and the erythritol can actually still cause digestive issues in some people, so in that case I usually recommend that people use allulose because that tends to be the most gentlest sweetener. And it doesn't crystallize like some of the sugar alcohols or blended sweeteners can, like Swerve or Lecanto. So it's ideal to use in jams and ice creams, or if you're making your own sweetened condensed milk. And yes, you can make your own sweetened condensed milk on the keto diet. It'll be sugar-free. All you need is butter, heavy cream, and a sweetener. And then you just cook that over the stovetop until it's thick. So now you can make certain pies or bars, and if you need that recipe, I'll have it linked down below for you. Another common sweetener that you see in recipes is corn syrup, which is loaded with sugar. And the replacement I use is vanilla syrup by Chalk Zero. It's sweet and thick, just like corn syrup, and works just as well. So I use it when I'm making pecan pie or in some bar recipes. And it's a lot better for you than regular corn syrup because there's only 1 gram of net carb per tablespoon. Sometimes it's hard to get certain flavors in a recipe, like if you're going for something like bananas because you want to make banana bread or banana cream pie. You can't really use bananas because 1 banana has 27 grams of carbs. So instead, I will rely on flavor extract so I can get that banana flavor without adding a ton of extra sugar. And there's some really cool extracts out there. There's cornbread, marshmallow, graham cracker, buttered popcorn, mashed potato, wheat bread, apple bubble gum. I'll have my favorite brand listed down below. Another flavor enhancer that I use in recipes are flavored electrolytes by Element, who is the sponsor of today's video. These aren't just for rehydrating, although they do contain a science-backed electrolyte mix of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. They also have delicious flavors like orange, watermelon, lime, raspberry, and I've used them in a lot of different recipes, like when I made keto gummy worms and watermelon high chews. I also love that it doesn't contain any fillers, so there's no sugar, no coloring, no dyes, no fillers. Right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with any order. You get 8 single serving packets free with any Element order. That's a great way to try all 8 flavors or just to share them with a salty friend. Get yours at drinkelement.com/KetoFocus. This deal is only available through my link. You must go to drinkelement.com/KetoFocus. The next category is leavening agents, which is basically how we get our baked goods to rise. Because remember, we can't use all-purpose flour, which has gluten in it, and gluten will help form this stretchy matrix to help puff up whatever you're making. But we can still use the standby old chemical leavening agents like baking soda and baking powder. Although baking powder does have some carbs in it, it's not enough to break the bank. The gas produced by these agents when they're mixed with an acid like lemon juice, yogurt, sour cream, vinegar, hint, hint. That's why I use those in some of my recipes, because your leavening agent needs an acid in order to form these bubbles, and thousands of these bubbles will get produced. But the second part of this equation that you need is you need a stretchy matrix. That's why when we're using gluten-containing substances, like if you're making a bread dough from all-purpose flour, it's very elastic. So when these bubbles form, they have this elastic matrix that allows the bubble to stay put. If you didn't have elasticity, your bubble's just gonna pop and go flat. And that's why a lot of keto baked goods are kind of flatter. So there's 2 ways that we can achieve this stretchy matrix in keto baking. The first way is to use mozzarella cheese, which is what we use in fathead dough. Mozzarella cheese is super elastic when it's melted. And so that's why a lot of those fathead dough recipes, the dough actually puffs up like it does in pizza dough. That's because of that elastic matrix from the mozzarella cheese is helping to keep those bubbles intact so that when they bake, they can actually, the gas can escape and that matrix is still there, leaving these beautiful air holes. The second way we can do this is from protein sources. So using eggs, egg whites, protein powder. Protein will also form this protein matrix, which is, again, it's another stretchy matrix where it will help trap those air bubbles and keep them stable while baking. It's kind of why a lot of keto baked goods call for a lot of eggs, is because you need that much of a protein matrix to help puff up your baked good. And unfortunately, it comes with a price because a lot of those baked goods can have an eggy flavor, but the way to combat that is to add cream cheese. I find that cream cheese or yogurt or sour cream, it just helps neutralize any sort of eggy flavor. I mentioned you could also use protein powder, which is actually my preferred way. I have a 0 carb protein powder that I get, so it's not going to add any additional sugars or any carbs to your diet. And I find that just adding like 1/4 cup or 1/3 cup of protein powder provides enough stretch to that baked good so that we can make it fluffy. If you're making sauces, cornstarch and flour are just not ideal on the keto diet. They're not very clean. But there's lots of options that we can use, and it really just depends on the recipe. We have heavy cream. You can use an egg yolk, gelatin, xanthan gum. My favorite is arrowroot powder. Arrowroot powder has 7 times the thickening power as regular all-purpose flour, so you really only need to add half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon for the entire recipe, which would be around 2 grams of carbs added for the entire recipe. A lot of people think the arrowroot powder is not keto, but really when you're using it as a thickener, you're only adding a couple carbs across like 6 to 8 servings or more. So go ahead and splurge and use the arrowroot powder because 1, it's not gonna make it slimy like xanthan gum would. 2, it works similar to flour and cornstarch as a thickener. It doesn't clump, it works the best. Chocolate. We have many different options for keto chocolate out there now. There's a lot of sugar-free chocolates, from chocolate chips that you can use to baking chocolate. So now you can easily turn grandma's chocolate chip cookie recipe keto. If a recipe calls for milk, just use nut milk or heavy cream instead. Most nut milks are keto friendly, they're low in carbs. Macadamia nut milk is my favorite because there's less than 1 gram of net carb per cup, and it's very creamy too. Heavy cream is an option, but I always don't really use it on its own. Sometimes I do, but I like the combination of heavy cream plus a nut milk. It thins it out and it gets it more of a consistency closer to milk. So I usually do half heavy cream, half nut milk. Luckily, berries like strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries are all keto approved. They're very low in sugar, and that's why you see them a lot in the keto recipes. You can also use limes, lemon, and some small amounts of watermelon and grapefruit. But certain fruits that are higher in sugars like bananas, apples, and peaches are really kind of off limits because there's a little bit too much sugar in those, especially when it comes to keto baking. So if you're trying to make something like an apple pie, that can be a problem because you can't use apples. But I have a solution to that. To get around this, I like to use a low-carb fruit that is neutral in flavor, like zucchini or chayote squash. They have a similar texture to apples, and they take on the flavor of whatever you add to it. And this is where some of those flavor extracts can come in. So you could add a few drops of a flavor extract like apple, and suddenly you can make apple pie. Now you know all my secrets. I guess you don't need me anymore. Just kidding. I'll never stop creating. I love experimenting. It's the scientist in me. If you want to try some more of my mad scientist keto creations, well then just click right here.